Hello, everyone, and thank you for giving Jeanne Balibar a warm welcome. I'm Nicholas Elliott, the New York correspondent of French film magazine Cahiers du Cinéma, and it's my pleasure to be here with you and with Jeanne this evening after this very peculiar and very great film by Jacques Rivette, the Duchess of Langeais, known in French as Ne touchez pas la hache, Don't Touch the Axe. So I'll start by asking Jeanne about Jacques Rivette, who you worked with twice. This was your second film with him. The first film was Va Savoir, which was actually, I think, his most successful film in the United States. And it's a very different tone, Va Savoir, than the film the audience just saw. So I wanted to ask you how you got to know Jacques Rivette and what your experience with him was like.
I got to know him in a very simple and funny way, which is that he had planned to do Va Savoir with Emmanuelle Béard, with whom he had done La Belle Noiseuse, and he had written the part for her. And I don't know why, in the last minute, Emmanuelle said she wanted to do another film, which was a very bad film, actually, which she chose to do. But oddly enough, this was the beginning of a very strong friendship between Emmanuelle Béard and myself. And Jacques, I heard about it afterwards, had a conviction, no, not a conviction, that's French.
He was convinced that,
he was convinced that if you lose an actor, you have to ask another actor who is the exact opposite of the first one. So being the exact opposite of Emmanuelle Béard, he asked to meet up with me, and he was a very peculiar person, and he did nothing like everyone else. And I remember how we met. We went for a drink, and he asked me what I had seen lately in the movie houses, and I don't know how come, but we spoke about Robin Wright Penn. And we both said she was our favorite American actress. This was back in 2001, I think.
Long before House of Cards.
Oh, a long time before House of Cards, while she was still doing the nappies. There's a period of time actresses we all have, or some of us have, where we're more doing things with babies as on set. And she had done this film, I think, with Nick Cassavetes, and I think that's the film where we both had seen her. Now it's a little bit confused in my head. But we both agreed that we loved Robin Wright Penn, and I think that's why he hired me for this part. First of all, because I was the exact opposite of Emmanuelle Béard, and second, because Robin Wright Penn was our favorite American actress at the time.
And then how was it different with Ne touchez pas la hache compared to this first experience with him?
It was very different because Jacques always had this very funny way of working, that he used to decide one of the actors would be the director in the frame somehow. And in Va Savoir, Sergio Castellitto was his like his envoyé in the picture, and I was the creator of Sergio. I mean, this was always like, there was Jacques, and then there was William Lubchansky, the DOP, and then there was this actor who was the director within the picture. And in Va Savoir, Sergio Castellitto was that one. And in this one, I was the one he had chosen to be his representative in the picture, so to speak.
And he actually told you, you're going to be my representative in the film?
No, I don't think he ever told me, but it was clear. Also because the character of the Duchess is someone who's always staging things. And we shot chronologically, which is very unusual. And the first scene was the one where I am preparing myself to he's coming, because I think the film starts, I haven't seen the film in a long time, and I think it starts in the convent.
Yeah, the film is told in flashback.
Yeah, but the first thing we shot was the one where I'm waiting for him in my boudoirs. And it was very much I had to behave like a director, really. Like, I'm going to sit here, and he's going to come here, and we're going to go to the sofa, and I'm going to show him my feet. And it was very obvious that I had to be the director in the picture, so to speak.
But that's interesting because there is a back and forth, a power shift in the film between you and your character, Langeais, and Guillaume Depardieu's Montriveau. But did you feel that throughout you retained this position as the director within the frame?
Oh yes, absolutely. Also because of Guillaume's very peculiar personality. It's a secret to nobody that Guillaume was one of, if not the best actor of his generation, and at the same time someone who had a very, very difficult life, and he was a very difficult being. And from the start, because this is one thing that Jacques also did, he always, and I think he's done that throughout his life, he would call an actor and say, with whom would you like to do my next film? So shortly after Va Savoir, he said to me, with whom would you like to do my next film? And I said, with Guillaume Depardieu. Actually, to say the truth, I said either with Guillaume or with Mathieu Amalric. And he said, no, I'm not a great fan of Mathieu's. I'm very great fan of Guillaume. And okay, it's a deal. I'm writing something for both of you. And then he started what he called writing. And he wrote, it's not even a synopsis, it's like 10 lines. And that was, at the time, the freedom that we still had in France, when French cinema world wasn't yet entirely subdued to the American way of doing things. And we didn't have to pitch a film, and we didn't even have to write a script back in the old days. And that was the turning point, actually, because he gave the different instances who give money those 10 lines for a story for Guillaume Depardieu and Jeanne Balibar. And they all said, well, we don't want you to make this film because there's no pitch, there's no script, there's no nothing. And Jacques Rivette had been one of the 4 musketeers of the Nouvelle Vague already for 30 years or whatever. And he'd never written a script in his life. And for the first time, and this was a sign of the times, they said, no, we don't go along with that. We don't go along with that anymore. Times have changed, and the times they are changing. Now it's the Sarkozy era, it's the new era, and this doesn't work anymore. So Jacques said, okay, they want something that's written. I'm going to give them something that's written. And he went to his library, his private, not library.
His bookshelves.
Bookshelves.
It was his library.
Which actually, this is, am I speaking too much?
No, this is great.
Too much?
I'm enjoying it.
Because it's a very amusing anecdote, because he had to move out to a new flat in those years. And he had bought a flat, and he moved in his bookshelves and the books, and the floor collapsed. And 2 minutes later, he would have fallen down to the 3rd floor, whereas it moved in the 4th floor. So, well, he went to his bookshelves, and he looked at the books, and he said, okay, I'm going to pick up a book, and they're going to have something that's already written. Because the first story had nothing to do with Balzac or with anything. It was completely different. It was a very contemporary story and some kind of weird internet complot or whatever it was.
Plot.
And then he was so annoyed, and he said, okay, they want something that's already all written. I'm going to give them that. Balzac, Duchess of Langeais. Antoinette, perfect for Jeanne. Monrivaux, perfect for Guillaume, okay. And then he did like, poof. I think he asked somebody else to, well, he said he asked somebody else to. And so they had something that was a script.
Well, it's interesting. It's as if Balzac was Rivette's fallback, because this was the third time he did a work based on Balzac, and probably it's the time he was most faithful to Balzac, because he made a film called Out One in the late 60s, early 70s, which is actually the Duchess of Langeais relates to that, because it's about this secret society, the 13, which is what Out One is. And then there's La Belle Noiseuse, which is based on Le Chef-d'œuvre Inconnu. But this one, I think, is relatively faithful. I mean, did you use the Balzac story to inform your performance or to prepare for the film, or did you just take what Rivette gave you?
No. Well, actually, I had read the book quite a few times in my childhood, and then when I was like an adolescent. It was one of my favorite books already, which is a how do you say that? Hasard.
A coincidence.
A coincidence, yes. And then I reread the book, of course, when he said we're going to be working on that. I remember thinking, oh my God, because the first 30 pages of the book, it's a description of how this character embodies a specific period of time, which is the Restoration after the French Revolution. And I remember thinking to myself, how do you do that? How do you embody a specific period of time in the 1820s? You know, because it's very clearly written by Balzac. She is the impersonification of this reactionary period of time. And I thought to myself, how do you do that as an actor? And what was your question?
I'm not sure I even remember. Oh, yeah, it was what you're answering. It was about how you used Balzac. So
yeah.
Now you have a question, which is how do I embody the Restoration?
Yeah.
Did you deal with it? What did you find?
No, I decided I was going to just bet that the director would do that for me.
And it's there. I mean, the film is, I find it to be a deeply enigmatic, though fascinating film. It's a film I love, but I can't completely get my head around it. And part of it is because these things about this is the period of civil war, and then there's going to be the religious wars, and there's this line that Monrivaux says to you, in the past you preferred society to me, now it's God. You feel that she and they are standing in for much more than the relationship between the two of them. And it also makes me wonder, especially now that you're bringing up the Sarkozy era, how this film was playing with contemporary reality in France, if at all. And I'm curious what you think about that.
I think I have been thinking a lot of things about that. And I think it's one of the great mysteries of Rivette's films, all of them. Because you have people like Godard, for instance, who are always referring very directly to the times where he's making a movie. If you look at La Chinoise or all the Godard films refer very, very directly to the times where they have been made. Or it's also very amazing. There was this film in the past, I think it's not his last film, but the one before, was this story with the boat.
Goodbye to Language? Adieu Langage?
Yes, I think that's the one with the dog.
No, the one before that. And I'm not going to remember the title.
With this boat. And it's very weird because 3 months later, this boat was shipwrecked. Yeah. And Godard had made a film about this boat because he wanted to speak about his present. And the way Rivette's relationship to the present times functions is very, very different because he never directly refers to the moment of time where he's making a movie. But if you look at L'Amour Fou or even Out One, these are films that really speak tell something about 1968, for instance. And this film, The Duchess of Langeais, I really don't know how he does it, but it's very much about the restoration of this moment where how do you call them in America? Neocons. Oh, yeah. They really came to power in France at that moment, and something changed in France at that moment. And somehow I remember traveling through France with the film when it came out and thinking to myself, this speaks about today, but nothing in it seems to be doing it. And I really don't know how he did it, but if you look at, for instance, Jacques Rivette's first film, so now, because
Paris nous appartient.
Paris nous appartient.
Belongs to us.
Yeah, Paris belongs to us. I don't like this film very much, and it's maybe the only Jacques Rivette film that I don't really like very much, because it has something so claustrophobic in it. But then if you think about it, this is exactly how the society in France was when he made the film, 1959 or something like that. But that's a mystery to me. If you're asking me, yeah, I think this film is very much about the Sarkozy era in France. How? Don't know.
Are there any questions from the audience at this point? Just wait 1 second and a microphone will come to you. Is that true? Or not?
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay, good evening. Great movie. I would like to ask you whether you believe that the character represented by Armand Monrivaux was a representation of Balzac's search for love through the last minutes of his life, and this historic vision that he may have of him fighting for love, even when they say still on still, or still against still. So isn't it true that he had a great struggle for love, and being a short man maybe also had some issues in his social life that maybe made it more difficult in his search for love?
No.
En gros,
I don't know. I'm sorry, I don't know. I'm not a scholar. I know very little about Balzac, I must say. I mean, I've read lots of his novels, but I think what is very sad about Monrivaux is that he is someone who has lost every hope in the public sphere, and I think this is a very important theme for Balzac and for his generation. What have we done with the French Revolution, and what have we done with the Napoleon era? And I think this is one of the interesting things in this character of Monrivaux, and also a reason why Guillaume was absolutely the perfect actor for that. Because it's the what remains when you've lost every hope to have how do you say that, an action on the world, whether good or bad, actually, because this is what Napoleon actually represents for France, something that was good at the beginning and that is rooted in the French Revolution and that ends up in the most appalling imperialism. But if you have renounced that all, what remains, and then it's not even love is possible. It's a very tragic character, I think. But I'm not sure I'm answering your question, actually.
I don't know much about Balzac, but I do know that his love life was relatively tragic. I mean, I think he married very late, or very shortly before he died. I'm sure that there's some level of suffering in love that may have been channeled into Montriveau.
But I'm not sure if Balzac was that much interested in love. I think he was interested in coffee drinking and making money. Which is very good, because then he wrote a lot and he was good at it.
True.
I wouldn't want to have had Balzac as a lover. Too much interested in other things.
Do we have any other questions? I see someone in the...
Yeah, I got the mic, so I got the question. You can get the next chance. I wanted to applaud your acting, and then I like the power play between these two lovers. You know, it's always goes back to Strindberg. When it comes to love, it's the battle of sexes. Someone has to win, and someone has to lose. Having said that, I don't know much about French history, so I can't go back into all those periods. But my question is, what is this French fascination for tragedy? It was in Camille. It comes in a lot of ways. I mean, the way the film was done is beautiful, but I'm just trying to understand. Thank you.
Is it bigger than in other countries? Oh, I'm sure you do. Really? You don't see that in Hollywood? It's funny because I don't have the feeling that France is that much interested in tragedy. There are many more. France is a very is very interested in drama, for instance. I mean, in the bourgeois drama tradition, or in comédie de mœurs. I don't know how you say that.
Comedy of manners.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I don't know how to answer your question, because I don't think there is a tradition of French tragedy in the theater in the 17th century, but it's very, very limited in time. It's very brief. I'm sorry, I'm just being useless with this question.
Maybe we'll see if there's another question. I see a hand up in the back, or I see a lot of hands. Maybe in the back here, in the middle.
Bonsoir, Jeanne. Thank you so much for a beautiful film. I really enjoyed it. My question is, there were many moments of contemplation, it seemed, both for Monsieur Monriveau and for your character. And I wonder if at any point in making the movie, you found yourself drawn to shooting a particular scene or drawn to certain lines, maybe even when you were reading the book as a child, and then, you know, reenacting those in the movie brought certain feelings and emotions back for you. If you could share some of that with us.
I think I was very sensitive to the tragedy of coquetry. It works in English? Okay. Because I think this is something which is a very, very complicated issue for a woman. The way you have to stage yourself, and also for an actress. But I think for every, and maybe for everyone, this is something that is I find very disturbing in the actual Me Too movement and everything that is happening since last year, and also more generally in this gender issue. I find it very disturbing because what I find, but maybe this is because I am myself an actress, I don't know how you do if you're not playing a part. I don't know how to get on with life if I'm not playing a part. And I think those parts, I fully agree, woman, man, those are parts, you know. It's like having to play a part for a film or for a theater play. But I wouldn't know how to do if I wasn't to work out my way within the convention of a part. And this is about what the part of Antoinette de Langeais, this is what it is about, actually. And I find it a very, very disturbing and problematic issue for a little girl, maybe, when I read it as a child, and for a woman. And I think it's a jail, but which makes it very painful, but it is also the only way to go on with life somehow. But this now is something very personal. Just to answer your question, I think this is where I thought I'm very, very attracted to this part, because it really means it meets up with things I have in myself.
Another question? I see a couple hands down here. A baseball cap.
I want to know, was the director trying to send the viewer a message about honesty of emotion on both sexes?
Yeah, I guess so. Yes, I think Jacques Rivette was a very honest person. And he was a very childish person, very, very naive. And I think this is his great quality. For instance, as opposed to Godard or to Truffaut, who were men and directors who were a lot more playing around with feelings. And I think he was a very, very pure, very naive person, actually, which is a little bit like the Prince Mishkin in the Idiot from Dostoevsky's novel. I always saw him as a kind of Prince Mishkin, something very innocent. it isn't a secret. He was a long part of his life single, and he had 3 very important love relationships, but very brief. And I remember he was always talking to me in Va Savoir and in the Duchess of Langeais and saying, you know, Jeanne, when you're in love, you do this and that, or you think this or that. And I remember thinking, how does he know all of that? Because it's been so short in his life, you know. And I don't know, he had a vision, which had a lot to do with honesty.
We have time for one more question, and I see a gentleman right behind this person who's just asked a question.
A film like this in America, where we seem to praise action, and you mentioned that word action, and Montriveau stops with action. He's finished with it. But it's all passive. It's all dialogue. It's conversation. Is that the strength of France and the weakness of American movies? One is action and one is language.
I don't think so, no. I think there are a lot of American movies where people do talk a lot and have a lot of conversations. But somehow maybe they're not mainstream movies in America. I don't know. There is a very, very strong. If you go back to the screwballs comedies, zum Beispiel. I live part-time in Germany, and it's kind of difficult for me right now to speak English because I keep having German words in my head. Yeah, lots of films in America are very, very talkative. And it's one of the great strengths of lots of American films, actually. As for action, I don't know. I don't think we can do it in France. We don't know how to do it. We just don't know. I have 2 children, and now they are 19 and 21, so I'm safe. I don't have to watch a lot of American action films anymore. I have been so bored in the last. I mean, I do love American action movies, but when you live with your children, you have to see so many of them. It's horrible. I don't know. This isn't really an answer.
Would you all please join me in thanking Jeanne Balibar for being here tonight?
Thank you very much.